Okay, hello, Mark. Yeah,
Hey,
yeah, thank you for being here. Okay, yeah. Uh, let's assume our audience are mostly Chinese, so they're familiar with guys like me, but not with you. So why don't you give us an introduction of you, why you came to China, why you are being an educator in China? When did this idea come across your mind, and when you made this decision?
yeah, China. I guess before I even thought about China as a country,
Hmm.
my uncle had left for China in about 1989. And when I was growing up, he'd come home from China twice a year to visit us. And he would tell us, the most crazy stories you could think of, like, I ate caterpillar soup.
Caterpillar soup. Caterpillar soup.
Yeah.
It sounded crazy to you.
It sounded crazy to me, like he would tell us stories of like
Uh,
crazy food he ate and but he mostly like my uncle is he still lives in China and
uh,
he's always been a prankster, a jokester, somebody who like, likes to have fun
uh,
and exaggerate stories and make things sound crazy. But he never did that in a way that was insulting of the Chinese civilization. He did it in a way that was like talking about that, Chinese people do different things
mhm,
in China and they eat different things. And, I think one of the key things about China that stands out to most other countries in the West is that Chinese people eat different things. Like, I mean, since I've lived in China, I've had pig brains, fish
yeah.
brains, turtle shells. I almost ate dog one day. And yeah, so when I was a child, my uncle would come back and he also taught us how to use chopsticks. So
Mhm,
I've been using chopsticks since I was like 5. And so that just kind of planted a seed in my head that the country China existed. Now, the other thing is like China also existed in the sense that like as a Canadian,
mm,
we have people from all over the world live in Canada, and Chinese people lived in Canada when I was growing up.
mhm,
So I guess in the 90s, after the handover from Hong Kong, from the Brits to the mainland China, a lot of Hong Kong people left Hong Kong and they went to British Columbia, Canada, they went to California.
yeah,
And
yeah.
Chinese people had actually been immigrating and working in the western coast of North America since like the railroads were being built in North America.
Hmm.
So there's a history of Chinese people living on the West Coast. And of course, the West Coast is the closest side of North America to China. And that's how the planes fly over, and there were probably boats at the time. So yeah, it's Chinese influence. We all had Chinese food in our neighborhoods growing up at
Hmm.
restaurants. In London, where I'm from, there was no Chinatown. In
Hmm.
Toronto, there was always a Chinatown, but in London,
Hmm.
there wasn't. London is a 2-hour drive from Toronto. So yeah, China was always a country that you always knew it was a country as a foreigner. Sorry, as a
Yeah.
Canadian. But
Uh,
I'm forgetting I'm
uh,
not in Canada right now. But but what did we know about China? We knew that, well, we thought China was like dirt roads, old bicycles,
no.
everybody ate noodles and rice and that was it. My image of China was kind of like an underdeveloped society infrastructurally, and and when you watched Chinese representation in media, American media, uh, most representations of Chinese people were racist.
Did you assume all Chinese are masters on Kung Fu?
Um, when I was a
uh,
kid, I probably thought every Chinese person knew, and I would call it kung fu. I wouldn't have called it like gong fu, like
Kung Fu,
kung
yeah.
fu, because that's what we
That's
call it.
crazy.
Because you got to remember, Bruce Lee came to California in the 70s, and he popularized kung
Mm,
fu. Um, and there was a lot of tension at the time because a lot of Chinese people, and if you watch the movie Eat Man with
mm,
Donnie Yen, and forgive me, I don't know his Chinese name.
Uh-huh. Eat
Um,
man.
Eep,
Oh,
IP,
eat. Oh,
Eep Man,
yeah.
Eep Nanren. I don't know how to say it in Chinese, but anyway, um, Bruce Lee's Shifu,
Mm-hmm.
Shifu, sorry,
Yeah.
Bruce Lee Shifu,
Master. Yeah.
Master Eat Man, okay, was his name.
Uh,
And he trained Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee came to America, he came to California. And at the
mhm.
time, a lot of Chinese were already in California, and he wanted to promote Kung Fu. So he
Yeah.
fought different people, and he really showed the world that the Chinese martial art of Kung Fu, which is derived from Tai Chi,
Mm,
is like amazing. But some Chinese people didn't want the white devils to learn kung fu. So when I was growing up, because of Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan and Jet Li and all these Hong Kong Chinese guys, they were
uh-huh.
just like amazing. Like watching their movies were amazing. And I was always amazed with like the fact that they only use their bodies to do amazing things.
Mm,
Like it wasn't so much the fighting, it was like the art. Like they could just use their bodies to do crazy things. Like Jackie Chan could run up a wall. He's like this 5'5" man, or however tall he is. He's a short man. He could run up a wall. Bruce Lee was so fast that the cameras had to
yeah.
slow him down because he was so fast they couldn't even follow his speed. And Jet Li was like this young looking baby face guy who was like just amazing. So for me, it was more of like, wow,
Wow.
like it was impressive.
So were
And
you
and
so were
yeah,
you
go
a
ahead,
little
go
bit
ahead.
disappointed when you first came to China? Were you like, wow, oh, those Chinese are not very good at exercises?
Well, okay. Um, Fast forward from the time I was 5 to the time I'm 30, I'm 29 years old, moving into
Uh,
China. By that point, I was very aware that not every Chinese person knew Kung Fu.
uh, uh,
But anyway, but there's a lot of China I didn't know. I would say that like if I was to talk to myself now, and if I was to talk to myself when I was 29, when I first moved to China,
mhm,
and if I was to ask myself, Mark, what do you know about China? I'd say, yeah, like generally an underdeveloped infrastructure,
mhm,
and very hardworking students, probably some of the most hardworking students in the world.
mhm,
Determined, very determined people, um, but not good at English.
mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I really didn't know much.
So their impressions on China were based on 1960 or before then, right? 1960s.
My impressions of China were
Uh,
like picture the world of China when Mao was the leader,
yeah, yeah. Everyone riding
and
bicycles. Yeah.
everybody's riding
Uh,
bicycles, and then picture everybody knows kung fu. So
uh,
it's like it's this is my mind, this is my imagination.
uh,
It's the Mao era in the
mhm,
1940s to the 1970s
mhm,
in my mind, even though it's like 2018. It's like, yeah, it's like Mao China. Everybody knows kung fu. Everybody eats rice and noodles,
uh,
and the cities aren't that developed, they're not that internationalized. It's very just Chinese.
Actually, Kung Fu is mostly popular in Cantonese, and what you, what your impressions on China have mostly been based on Cantonese culture. It's not the man. It's not the
Mm.
very mainland. Okay, it's not what you see
Guangdong,
in Guangdong Cantonese. Uh,
Guangdong,
just like
Shangang.
caterpillar soup. We don't drink caterpillar soup in Wuhan, right?
Where does it come from? Because when my uncle first moved here
Yeah,
33 years ago, he moved to Taiwan.
yeah, okay. So mostly the Cantonese and the Hong Kong people and the Fujian people, they moved to the West and they bought the so-called Chinese culture there. So that's what foreigners' impressions on China have been based on. What do you
Hmm.
think? Yeah, that's all about
So
That's more
southern
about
China.
Hong Kongese. Yeah, that's
Southern China, got it.
southern China.
And it makes sense because the UK came in and then they invaded China with the Opium Wars, and then there was an influence of the UK, and to this day there's influence of the UK. So it makes sense why people from the South were more likely to go to the West because of that influence. And it's funny, what's also kind of funny about Chinese history is that Americans tried to turn China democratic uh, and Christian through Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the nationalists,
Hmm.
and that failed abysmally, which is a fancy way of saying that it didn't work at all. But where the West had more influence
Hmm.
was by giving away and selling opium to Chinese people. So they tried they tried the religion way, didn't work. They tried the democracy way, didn't work. They tried the drug way, and it didn't really work in the sense that Chinese people were not like, oh my God, we want to be like the West because of opium. But opium destroyed a lot of Hong Kong culture, and it was like a virus to the people, and it was very addictive, and it destroyed many people's lives. Opium was being used by a lot of soldiers, especially after the First World War, and it was a sedative. It's a way to cause you to relax. And hey, if you think about it, Chinese people, even in the 1900s, in the 1920s and 30s, they were stressed and they had a lot of pressure.
Yeah,
They had a
yeah.
lot of people to live hard lives. So opium was an escape. So some Chinese really liked it, but it was destroying the society, and it was messing up families because what do you do when your dad comes home from work and he starts smoking opium, and then he's useless as a father?
Yeah.
And this is not a criticism to China. I mean, I'm blaming the UK for this, but the other thing was like, one of the reasons why in America alcohol got banned, prohibition is the period of time in America where alcohol was prohibited.
Yeah, yeah.
Prohibition, to prohibit, to stop. And the Americans stopped alcohol, and the reason why was because a lot of Christian women got together and they said, "Hey, we don't want our men drunk, spending all this time in the pubs." And where did pub culture come from? Where did drinking culture come from? It came from the UK. And America started off with a lot of influence from the UK. So opium in China, opium in Hong Kong, alcohol in America, these were all things that were basically making men bad fathers and bad husbands. And they were also more abusive, they were more neglectful. So it was destroying Chinese society, opium. So that's why China said, like, get out of here. It's illegal. You can't do this. Um, and then China, UK comes back and says, "Screw you! We're going to bring our ships and we're going to start a war with you."
Yeah, we
So
consider as a big shame on us. Yeah, and we call the previous generation as 东亚病夫. That's what
the
that's
century of
yeah,
humiliation.
yeah. That's where you saw Bruce Lee and how the board and kicked the body apart, right?
Oh, I didn't see that. You have to show me that video sometime.
Okay, okay.
But anyway, to your question about my impressions of China, like everything I just talked about was stuff I've learned over the last 3.5 years. But my impressions of China were my impressions of China were primitive. Not
Mm-hmm.
China, but my impressions of China were primitive. They were basic. They were
Mm-hmm.
very underdeveloped. They were
Yeah,
very ignorant. Um, yeah, but I still knew my whole life that China was a massive country, and I knew that China was a serious country
and you call
because
it Middle Kingdom.
I at the time I wouldn't have known that, but I knew that the students who came from China to Canada were very competitive. They were not good socially. Socially speaking, they stayed to themselves. They didn't really talk to
Yeah.
anybody. Their English wasn't that good, but in school they excelled. So I knew that China was doing something with their society to produce such competitive students, but I didn't really know anything else.
Okay, let's go back to your birthplace, London, right? And there's a stability that we heard of the most. That's Ryan Gosling, the actor
Mm,
in La La Land. We
yeah.
like him, yeah. All the young people like him. And how do you describe your hometown, London? What
Well, I
kind of
wouldn't use
places
Ryan Gosling to describe my own family. Otherwise,
there?
Chinese
Yeah.
women will think that every man from London looks like Ryan Gosling, and as you can see, I don't
As
look like
charming
Ryan
as her.
Gosling.
Yeah.
Now, actually, I want to say this hat is an L for
Uh-huh.
London. This is a
London.
baseball hat from London, Canada, from my home city. I bought it before I moved to China because it's a baseball team. In
Uh-huh.
London, Canada, we have one of the oldest baseball stadiums in North America, so in the world, which is pretty cool. It's one of the
Uh-huh.
things we're very proud of. And as a kid, I'd watch baseball games. But yeah, London, Canada is 2 hours southwest of Toronto, driving, you know,
2 hour driving.
2 hour
So
drive southwest, 100
two
kilometers
hundred
an hour.
kilometers.
Exactly,
200.
exactly.
Oh.
200 kilometers.
Uh-huh.
Um, 1 hour drive north of where I live. I'm at a I'm at a lake. There are the Great Lakes that surround where I live. The Great Lakes, Lake Superior, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, Lake Michigan.
Uh-huh.
So Lake Huron is one lake that is um, north of
Much
where
bigger
I
than
live.
East Lake.
Oh, well, much bigger. These are called the Great Lakes for a reason. They're
Okay.
massive. If you look at a map of North America, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
East Lake is gorgeous, but like
But
Lake
East Lake
Huron,
is an in city lake, right? Inner
yeah,
city lake.
yeah,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
different.
So whereas like Lake Huron on one side is Canada and on the other side is America.
Ah,
So
okay.
1 hour drive, you get to a beach, and you're at Lake Huron. It's beautiful. You can swim in it. Lots of there are lots of places to go, shops, like small privately owned shops. Then you go 1 hour south and you're at another beach. It's called Lake Erie. That's the lake. And I went camping out there with my friend one summer. We literally just slept on the beach under the stars. No tent,
Oh,
just slept on the beach and listening to the waves crashing, to the sand. So London is a city of 450,000 people. London is a middle class city in Canada. It's neither a great city nor a bad city. Um, London has a university, a well-known university, and has a well-known college, and both of them produce very good students who can help contribute to the economy and hopefully thinking and ideas. And London has a river that runs through, just like the Thames River. We have the river, sorry, just like the River Thames, we
mm,
have the Thames River. So we took that idea from London, England. London is recently became a city of more technological businesses, IT. High manufacturing is expanding. High technology manufacturing is expanding.
mm.
Farming technology is also improved in the last while. So we have a surrounding London. It's all countryside, so farmers and crops everywhere.
What
Um,
what's those residents big concerned? Are they as eager to money as we are?
no one is as eager as Chinese people to make money.
Yeah. So what's their most concerned topic? Yeah. What?
That's a good question, Sam.
Let's say a bunch of old guys hanging out on the street. What would they talk about?
I actually used to work for a seniors home where old people lived. They talk about their families. They
Uh,
talk about their youth, their childhood. They talk about and also like they play cards together, just like
uh,
people play poker in Chengdu. They
uh,
play cards together. They have card clubs. They go for walks. But talking, yeah, they'll talk about the government. They'll talk about politics because um, we can talk openly about the government and politics. We can criticize the government and politics in Canada, and it's perfectly normal. But like older people, they're kind of past it. Like they at one point they were more politically engaged and then they kind of got over it. A lot of older people, they kind of just give up faith and hope in the government. They in Canada, they were like, the government said they were like this, they said they're going to do that, but then they didn't do it. I believed in them, and then I don't believe in them anymore. Now I just want to make sure I have my pension, my retirement fund, and I can, be healthy. And because you got to remember, we have universal healthcare in Canada, so we're not as
Yeah.
worried about health in Canada as you guys are in China.
Mm,
So I have to say, as long as somebody is like mentally healthy as they're
yeah.
older, they can have a really good life in London, Canada. And we don't live with our parents, by the way.
Yeah.
Like like after we're 18, we move out, and then when our parents get older, they have their own houses, and our parents want their own houses. They don't want to live with us. And then people who want to downsize and maybe need more care, they move into a seniors home where old people live. And yeah, they play games, they do exercise, they go on trips together. Um, like I said, card clubs. But money,
Mm,
like we are not driven by money like Chinese
yeah.
people are.
Do you
We're
think
like,
it is? Do you think if that's because the immigrants who do the hard work, so the resident, the local people who can relax?
yeah, it's a good point. So I knew I know a man. He owns a farming company. They make potatoes and other things,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a supplier for brands. And he said to me when I was growing up, Canadians know, like Canadian students will no longer work in the countryside, labor work. Now it's all immigrants. So
Oh,
they find people, they look all over the world for the most hardworking, loyal, dedicated, and kind workers. And I don't remember where he said they were from at the time, but what they do is they get them a work permit, they give them housing, they give them food, they give them a job, and then they're laborers in the fields. Because, like you said, the locals, as
mm-hmm.
the more Canadians have naturalized, and the more we've turned to higher technology, and the more we've relied less on country farmers, which is not the best thing. But the more people turn down labor and they look down on it like it's
Mm,
like they're too good for it. So like when I was a kid, I picked rocks, and like my friend Dennis and I, we one summer we made some good money. It was $10 an hour, which is the equivalent to um 50 kwai, and we made $10 an hour picking rocks, because when a cultivator is a machine that digs, that turns over the soil, so then the soil is more fresh and it's more fertile, so things can grow in the soil. So we would go into the ground, into the dirt, and we'd pick rocks out of the ground, because this big machine, if a rock was bigger than your fist, that rock could destroy $1 million machine, a 5 million kwai machine. So we did labor, and that was fine. He was an immigrant from Poland. I'm not an immigrant, but I come from immigrant. I mean, every white person from Canada is an immigrant,
yeah.
and every non-white person from Canada is
It's
an
all about the
immigrant.
generations, right?
Yeah, yes, but so yeah, like you could say that Canadians in London, especially the white Canadians, and the more naturalized Canadians in London, they can focus more on education. So I would say that in my city, a massive priority is education. Everything is like, school is free from kindergarten, well, sorry, from grade 1 into grade 12. Kindergarten is now subsidized or free. I think we do full day kindergarten. We used to do half day kindergarten. Now we do full day. It enables mothers to work more. So I have to say, a big priority in my city growing up, and a big conversation, was around education, because we had two major educational institutions. So we were driven by more of a balanced life. Like we wanted to have most Londoners, they grow up in London. If they stay in London, then they go to college or university, they get a job, they have a family, they buy a house. Like they get the family and then they buy the house, by the way. Um, and then our focus is on developing a good family, and developing a good life, which basically means having a house, having food, going on trips once in a while with your family, helping your kids go to university. This is a middle class family way. So it's much more, and then social, like we have friends and we go out and we do things. So like, and you got to keep in mind, because China's education policies used to be, and they still are, but it's changing. They're so focused on like putting in hours and hours and hours of work. So like
Yeah.
China's like, oh, we just need to put in hours and hours and hours of work and then we'll get better at everything. Well, now China's realizing it doesn't work like that. So
That's what we call the beginning of the communalism.
communism.
The beginning phase of the communalism. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
how it
well, I
works.
mean, China is a really old young country.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
really
Good,
old young country.
good discrimination. Yeah.
Description. I did not
Description.
discriminate. That's
Ah,
completely
sorry.
different.
Yeah.
If I discriminated, that would have been probably not kind. Chinese writing started about 6,000 years ago, and writing is a key feature that unifies Chinese people. But as a country, it's only been around since 1949. So I went to the bank today. I was there for 3 hours to do a money transfer to Canada. In Canada, that would be absurd. Like, there's no way I've ever spent 3 hours in a bank,
You just
ever
spent three
in
hours.
Canada.
Oh.
But the banking system is young in China. You know, the political system is young in China. The like everything that happened after 1949 is young in China, but it's a 6,000-year-old civilization.
Maybe the service for you is a little bit special. Okay, I never spent 3 hours in bank. Maybe the service for you foreigners is
Well, I had to
special.
wait. First of all, I waited at least an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then the service I get is an international money transfer, and for an international money transfer, it takes at least an hour, and
Okay.
it's on average took 3 hours for a while.
Okay.
Like me sitting at the counter for 3 hours. And other Chinese people behind me, like the aunties and the uncles, will be like yelling at the teller, like, what's going on? Why aren't you seeing me? Why is this Lao Wai here forever? Like, what is he doing that's so important? But it's not me. I bring all my documents, I have everything I need, and I give it to them. And then they literally sit there for an hour and then they do this. And then like another manager comes behind them and says, looks over their shoulder and is like, yep, 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 do that, okay, okay. And then they look at a notebook with handwriting about how to do an international money transfer. I sign like 20 pieces of paper every time. And yeah,
It's
China
because
doesn't want, yeah, go
it's,
ahead.
it's because those workers have no need in hurry. You know, they will never finish the clients, right? They do their
No,
work and they go off their work. So
they're
yeah,
so
they're just
used to, you're right.
relaxing. Yeah.
You're right. They're so used to a high quantity of clients that they don't ever think they'll complete their work. So they have no motivation to be more efficient.
Yeah, there will never be an end of a queue.
Yeah. Yeah. And they worked like
So
today, the
why
girl
hurry?
worked. Yeah, like you know how Chinese are. They nap during the day, and but this girl had no nap and no lunch because she was doing my money transfer.
Yeah, okay. Why don't we go back to London? When did you seriously discover the idea of moving to another country?
So when I was growing up, my mother, we take a taxi sometimes, but we were too poor to have we had one vehicle. My dad would have to take that to work.
How many
Um,
seats?
in a taxi,
Seats, vehicle. I wonder.
in a taxi.
You said you had a vehicle, right? I
Yeah.
wonder
Oh,
how
it was
many
an eight
seats.
seater. It was
Oh,
an
eight
eight-seater
seats.
van
So,
because we had 8 people.
oh, that's big.
Oh yeah, it was
Uh,
a big cube. Well, a rectangular prism to be exact. But anyway, yeah. So basically, when my dad had the car or the van, we couldn't use it. So sometimes we have to use a taxi, and my mom would get talking to the drivers. Now, typically, the drivers in London were from Africa, the Middle East, mostly India, and she would talk with them, and they're mostly men. They're mostly trying to make money and send it back home, or eventually bring their family over to Canada to have a better life uh, from their perspective. I have no judgments on these countries, but this is just what they would tell us, and my mom would just connect with them, and before you know it, my mom would be like, "Hey, why don't you come over for Christmas? Your family's in Iraq," or "Why don't you come over for Christmas? Your family's in Somalia." Or wherever, and then or Thanksgiving or Easter, and so they would come, and our table would have my family and then my relatives, and then there'd be a random guy from some random country. So I grew up with this. So it wasn't that it started with China, but it's that like the concept of a global community
yeah, you have a global
was,
childhood.
yeah, I had a global childhood.
Okay.
And Sam, it's not a coincidence that my family consists of I have nieces now that are half Angolan, half Ghanaian, half Korean, and my sister's gonna get married to a guy from El Salvador. My other sister's married to a guy from Jamaica. So Jamaica, Angola, Ghana, El Salvador, and then my brother married his wife, and she's white Canadian, blue eyes, brown hair. She's probably I have no idea what her background is. And then us, the kids, I'm an English, Italian, Jewish, Russian, Ukrainian, Belgian person.
Yeah, you have a part of breed of a Jew.
Yeah, part of my family
Ah,
background is Jewish, which is why my hair, not now, but it can get curly, and I can like puff it up. Because
okay.
Jews tend to have curly dark hair, and I have kind of curly dark hair.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. So go. What then? Then.
What then? Yeah, so internationalization was always a part of me. And then I went to elementary school because I was homeschooled until the end of grade five. So I was taught by my mom until the end of grade five. I stayed at home. And then in grade six, I went to school. And at school, some of this girl's from Colombia, this person's from this country, and this guy's from Korea. And this was normal.
No
And
Chinese.
not not yet. No,
Korean.
I
Yeah.
don't.
There
I
must have
don't
been
Korean
Korean and
because
Japanese.
Koreans are democratic. South Koreans are democratic. They're more in line with Canadians
Ah,
ideologically.
yeah.
Canadians are better friends with South Koreans than they are with, well, I don't know if they're better friends with South Koreans than Chinese, but we're both democratic and we're both Christian, so
Did
we have some similar backgrounds.
he bring the K-pop to the class?
No, no, no. I don't know if K-pop was a thing then, to be honest. Andrew Bay was his name. He could spin a textbook on his finger. I remember he
Yeah,
was really good at he was.
yeah. We actually likes to do tricks with pens with books.
I didn't
To kill
actually
the
start
time.
meeting Chinese people. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Finger tricks, and I didn't actually start meeting Chinese people really until my master's. That's really fast forwarding. Um, Before that, because the thing is, man, I went to university, but Chinese people didn't hang out with the whites.
Mm. Yeah,
Chinese people didn't hang out with the Africans. Chinese people didn't hang out with the Indians. They only hung out with the Chinese. So I never knew Chinese because they hid amongst themselves. And then when I went to my second university, there were a lot of Chinese, and so I went to Windsor University, and then I went to the University of Western Ontario. Windsor was in Windsor, which is 2 hours from London. London had what? London University,
yeah,
University of Western Ontario, and sorry, yeah, Western University. And there were a lot of Chinese and a lot of Indians, but Chinese did not hang out with the
yeah.
non-Chinese.
They don't even hang out with Japanese or Korean or other Asian countries.
No, they
No,
don't.
and the
They don't.
colonists don't hang out with the East and North people. Yeah,
And I mean, and it's possible that
mm.
Taiwanese don't even hang out with
No, they
Hong
don't.
Kongese, and Hong Kongese don't hang out with like Guangdongese, and
Yeah,
Guangdongese don't
yeah,
hang out
yeah.
with like Chinese people. They really, because if you think about Chinese society,
They
it's
are
the
really
most
separated. Yeah.
well, the most basic unit in China is the family.
Mm. Yeah.
And China is used to what they're used to, and they stick with what they're used to. Canada is a cultural mosaic, which is a way of saying that we have people from cultures from all over the world. We're used to that. China is a very homogeneous society where 95%, give or take, of Chinese people are from the Han stock, the Han ethnic group.
Mm.
And then you have minorities. I think you have, gosh, how many minorities? I don't remember the number. We have a lot of minorities. But Chinese families stick together and they hang out with people who have similar values to them, speak the same dialects and stuff like that. But there isn't a lot of like, I don't, China is a mystery to me in the sense that it's like, it's so diverse if you really get to know
Yeah.
it, but you guys are so connected at the same time. And I think that Mandarin, Putonghua, is a big reason for that.
Mm. Yeah. There are many parts of culture in China that
Yeah,
really
like
get along with each other.
it's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? Siblings. If you live in the same house with siblings like I did, you don't really get along with your siblings.
Yeah.
You're very similar, but you don't really get along. It's normal. But there's so much regional diversity in China where when it comes to foods, when it comes to dialects, when it comes to ways of life, like compare Chengdu to Shenzhen. Those are like those are almost different countries. Chengdu is like strolling, chilling, poker in the streets, go for walks, guang guang. They have good universities in Chengdu, but then Shenzhen is like busy, 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 busy,
Yeah.
busy, busy,
I
busy.
wonder which Chinese cities had you heard of in school? Did you hear of?
Probably heard about Beijing because the Olympics were in Beijing.
Yeah, Shanghai or
Shanghai.
not
Um,
Shenzhen, not Shenzhen, right?
no, no, no.
Not Wuhan.
Shenzhen just started in the 1980s, and no, we didn't
Oh,
know about that. And like, and I wouldn't have called it Beijing. I wouldn't have called it Shanghai. I would have called it Shanghai,
Shanghai.
Chengdu,
Chengdu? Did you hear of Cheng?
Wuhan,
Oh.
Wuhan. I call it Wuhan. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And so what then? When did you discover the idea of moving to
So
another country?
when I before I went to teachers college, a lot of people I knew, including my sister, went to different countries to teach, and they talked about there was good money, it was good experiences, and it's a different world. And I grew up in London, and I went to the University of Windsor. I went to America. When I was in university, I traveled to Pakistan high school and university. I traveled to Kenya,
Mhm.
Africa. I traveled to Spain. I traveled to Portugal, Pakistan,
Did it cost a lot?
Nicaragua. Sorry.
Did it cost a lot? I mean, traveling abroad to those countries.
Yes is the simple answer, but
Oh,
because of why I went to these countries, I didn't have to pay for most of it.
oh.
So
Okay, so
even though I came from a poor family, if you
uh,
come from a poor family, but your society has a social conscience,
uh,
then the society may pay for certain things because they believe that people who are poor should have an opportunity to do things because if they weren't poor, then they might get those opportunities because they are poor, they might not. So when I
so
went to Nicaragua, that was paid for mostly by my university.
so the government financially supported you.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
the social network in Canada is very, very good, very
Oh,
good.
that's good.
Healthcare, education, and like for example, if you wanted to join a soccer league and it
Mhm.
was connected to the city, you could pay the poor person's price or the non-poor person's price. You would just show them how much money you make in a year, and then they'd say, "Oh, you don't make that much money. You can pay the poor person's price." So we got to mix and mingle with people from different cultural backgrounds, different wealth levels in society, even though I couldn't afford to actually do these things unless I had help. So China. Um, so because teachers were getting their teaching degrees or their first degrees and they were traveling and working in different countries, it was one of the things that was happening. And my uncle had been in China for a while. My sister went to Taiwan for 3.5 years, which is I'm now been in China longer than my sister has. Um, and Teresa, my sister, went to Korea. She's married now, has a kid. So like basically the seed was in my mind. And then when I went to teachers college, I thought to myself, I don't want to start teaching in Canada. I want to start teaching somewhere else. And I thought the Middle East. My mind was set on the Middle East. But in the Middle East, they needed to have at least 1 year of teaching experience. And the same was in, I think I had a job offer in Korea. But China had the best opportunities and they had the most opportunities. And my friend at the time said, Mark, I've been teaching in China for 3 years. I love it. I went to high school with this guy. He's like, I'm in a city called Wuhan,
Mhm.
and I love it here. It's great. And I thought to myself, you know what? I went to high school with this guy. If he loves it, I'm sure I'm going to love it too. So after 9 years of university, my bachelor of literature and in history, and my teaching degree and my master's of education, I said, okay, I think I have enough education. I'm now going to teach somewhere else. China was the first opportunity. And then there I was. And I never planned on making China a long-term plan. It was always like a 3 to 5 years, pay off my student debt. But the longer I stay in China, the more I hope I can stay in China.
Oh, that's good to hear. Why were there any other facts that made you choose Wuhan
No,
instead of Shanghai? Only,
no,
only that
no.
job offer.
My friend was in Wuhan.
Uh,
My friend, my friend lived in Wuhan. He worked in Wuhan. He said it was good. And I thought to myself, why would I go to a different city? And I had offers in Shanghai and I had offers in Beijing. But I thought to myself, why would I go to a city that I don't know anyone there when I can go to a city with someone I know who I went to high school with and they teach Canadian curriculum and they have a lot of Canadians at that school. It seems like this is the right fit for me. And I didn't care that I never heard of Wuhan before. Like I went on Wikipedia and Wikipedia said Wuhan is the Chicago
yeah, East
of
Chicago, right?
China
Of
with
China,
all the
yeah.
lakes and the buildings. And yeah, so I had one job offer where I could have made like an extra, I don't know, 5 to 10,000 a month. But I said I am wanting to teach English literature and history.
Mm,
And they said, well, we want you to be a language teacher and a tech teacher. And I said, well, I don't want to be a language and tech teacher. I went to school for this. I want to do that. Like, well, the first year we'll start you off with this and you'll be a language teacher and then you'll be a tech teacher. And then maybe after that, if we get this, then that happen. And if we get this, then that might happen. And I was like, I don't trust you guys. There's no way you can guarantee that I'll actually get what I want. So I'm like, no, thank you. Like I turned down higher paying jobs
mm,
for more for a job that was going to fit me and my needs better.
mm,
And Maple Leaf provided me with that opportunity.
mm. So you prefer to teach English literature than to be a language teacher, right?
I
You
never
prefer
wanted to be a language teacher. I'm
yeah.
not even qualified to be a language teacher. Um, well, based on Chinese law, I'm technically qualified to be a language teacher because I have a master's of education. And my master's enables me to work as a language teacher without needing the language certificates, but I'm not a qualified or trained language teacher. So I never wanted to teach language. That was never my goal.
Yeah, so by then you intended to teach the English literature in college or in
No,
some
in high
not
school.
in
Maple Leaf
some
is a K to 12. I wanted to teach
uh,
high school, and that's what I got.
was eventually was your first stop in Wuhan uh,
My
language.
first stop in Wuhan
Yeah,
was
yeah.
the airport.
Oh no, I mean the job position.
It was an English literature and high school teacher. Well,
Okay.
I taught technology, English literature, marketing, communications, uh, and yeah, I think that's about it.
But I think teaching English literature in a high school is more about language teaching in Wuhan. Right? They
No,
expect no.
no,
Those kids are
absolutely not. Teaching,
so good, are already good in on English.
they have to be.
Oh,
If they're not, then they're not going to pass.
oh, okay, I see.
Sam,
Uh-huh.
teaching about Chinese poetry is not the same thing as teaching Chinese language.
It's not. It's not.
It's not the same. And you took those courses in high school, so you know that.
Mm, but I just okay. All right.
Like teaching English literature is about teaching culture.
Mm-hmm.
Teaching an idea is an art
Yeah.
and communication and teaching language is a skill.
It's vocabulary
It's a
words, mm,
yeah, vocabulary, sentences,
grammar.
grammar,
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Once you came to Wuhan, what's your first impression in Wuhan? What
I
impressed
was
you the most?
impressed by the airport. I was impressed by the airport.
It's good.
Um, High ceilings. The airport had hugely high ceilings.
uh,
Everything was like so big. And then
uh,
when we drove into the city, it took forever to get to Jiangxia from the airport. Still does.
yeah.
Um, and a lot of most of what I remember first seeing were older buildings. No, no, not not like old, like European old or
Mm-hmm.
but like old, like not the most attractive buildings. But then you would see the cityscape, and then the city was like very modern. So another thing that really impressed me about Wuhan was the infrastructure, like the trains that run through the city, the monorail. You guys have a monorail in Jiangxia where I lived. The subways, the busing, like the transportation was impressive,
So,
and the traffic was insane.
so you are really impressed by the good quality of the infrastructure,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
Yeah.
like once I actually came to China, I was blown away by its
Yeah.
scale. Like it was completely not what I thought it was going to be.
Completely not
No,
100%. It's like the opposite.
no, like well,
Oh,
no, it's like
what
like
did
I
you
said,
expect? What did you
I
expect?
told you, I pictured a 1950s Maoist China where
Uh,
everybody rode bicycles.
you expected to sleep in a hay in some hay?
No, no, no. I knew people lived in apartments and stuff. I slowly became less ignorant about China. But then
Uh,
once I actually moved to China, I took a Harvard University course on China from Mao Zedong to modern day Xi Jinping. Um, I read, as you know, Sam, I've read books. Lin Yutong is my favorite Chinese writer. I've read, my laptop is sitting on I Ching, the Book of
yeah.
Changes.
Hmm.
And you can see behind me a Shan Shui painting.
Hmm.
Um, I uh, I have always been a student of my life. Every time I've gotten into a new environment, I have fallen in love with parts of my environment and studied it, asked a lot of questions. I've always been like this. So the cool thing about China is you can never know enough about China. There's so
Oh,
much history, there's so much civilization, there's so much, international. We have a trade war, we have political ideological differences. We have There's so much that's different that hey, and let me show you something.
uh,
Like I say, I'm a student of China.
uh, well,
So like,
is that something you what is made of?
it's a puzzle. It's wood.
Oh, okay.
So basically, China I find extremely fascinating because I think I could study about China for the rest of my life and I still wouldn't know that much about China.
Yeah, we are still learning. Yeah,
Absolutely.
we are
In the
still some
language.
distant from our ancestors.
Yeah, well,
Our
especially
modern,
your
yeah,
generation.
yeah, and so totally different from our ancestors. Okay, I wonder how you spent the first days in Wuhan. And can you tell me a little bit about the life details? Like how did you eat the next morning? Well, what did you eat? Or
The first meal I had in
you went?
Wuhan was like a rice and vegetable and meat dish at some random Chinese place on Junction Road.
Check.
Um, uh,
Your friends were accompanying you.
I was with the group of people who landed on the same day.
Uh,
Stephen Lee was one of them,
were you
and another
co-workers
lady.
or?
My coworkers were mostly
Uh,
sorry, I'm a little
uh,
tired. My coworkers were mostly Canadian.
uh,
But I remember when we discovered Rogamian,
mhm. Yeah.
my coworker comes up to me and she's like, "Mark, you got to try it. It's like four kwai, and it's like peanut butter and noodles, but it's so good. It's so cheap and it's so filling." I was like,
Yeah,
I
it's
was
so
like, I was
filling.
like, I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And we used to like, if we, I'm not much of a drinker, but some of my friends would get drunk and then they'd be like, oh my gosh. And then I woke up in the morning and I had two bowls of rugamian, two bowls. So it's
So
a big deal.
that's when you realize you will never worry about money in Wuhan. It's so easy to,
Well,
yeah.
the benefit of being a foreigner and working for companies that hire foreigners and they pay you as teachers, like, well, if you're going to be a foreigner in China, one of the most efficient ways to make good money is to be a teacher. So relative to the local costs, yeah, yeah, in that sense. But you got to remember, a lot of foreigners like me, they come to China with debt. They went to university for many years and they have debt. So they
Mm-hmm.
come to China to pay off their debt.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people think that foreigners, especially white foreigners, are rich. And what they don't realize is that the people who come to China to teach are not rich. They're mostly from lower to maybe middle class families. And if they were back home, they'd have to struggle through basic jobs to eventually grow through the economy. But most people have one degree, and most people have no work experience outside of teaching in China. So like, we're not rich. Just because I make more money than you per month does not mean I'm richer than you. Because if your family owns a house and if your grandparents own a house, you're wealthy and we're not. We don't have family here. We don't have like a backup plan. Like foreigners, one of the reasons why foreigners stick together is because they are each other's support system. And Chinese have their own support system financially and family wise, but we don't have that here.
Yeah, family wise.
So the other thing is Chinese spend less money because I would argue that in some ways Chinese have less needs because certain needs are met by their families, but we need to meet those needs ourselves. So we have higher expenses for certain things. Like how many Chinese people do you know spend 3,000 renminbi a month on rent?
On rent, no, no.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
No, they don't do that. But
Uh,
in so
People
so
from
like
other provinces may spend like a 1 to 2,000 on rent, I suppose. Not
yeah.
3 or 4.
Now, Shanghai and Beijing, you're paying about 6,000 a month on rent. And so most people I know share an apartment with somebody else. But
Yeah.
my point is that like don't judge a book by its cover. Don't look at a foreigner and think just because they're a teacher, they're rich. Even if they make more money than you, don't think that they're wealthy because wealth is an abundance of something. And most foreigners, when they come to China, they're not wealthy.
They will never rent an apartment like you. They will rent most of them will rent a room and
Yeah,
share the living
exactly. And they'll
place
share a
with
space and it's
their
like
friends.
1,000 renminbi in Wuhan.
1,000. Yeah.
Dajilu and stuff. I remember asking a Chinese friend, I was like, hey, like, how much do you pay for rent? And he told me like 1,200. I'm like, what? I paid like 3,000 when I moved here.
Okay. How about your first job in Wuhan? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, Maple Leaf International School. It's the biggest Chinese international education system in the world. And we were teaching Canadian curriculum. I loved my students. I got super involved in the community. Cool thing about Maple Leaf was they had so many opportunities for students to grow, to challenge themselves, to try new things. A lot of clubs, sports teams. There was a lot of community, a lot of activity. It was fantastic. I loved it. And that's kind of my first year, and I still talk to some of the teachers there. Um, and then, but I moved into early years education because my mom was a early years educator, and I knew after studying my master's of education that I wanted to explore what the beginnings of education were like.
Oh,
And I went into kindergarten for 2.5 years, and I was a head teacher and then a headmaster. I oversaw 4 schools and the international experiences for over 800 children. And overall, really good experiences. Definitely a lot of cultural things I had to like understand and accept and adapt to. But I'm really happy I worked in early years education because it taught me about the basics of learning for young thinkers.
but wouldn't that be a shift from teaching culture to teaching language, which is a bit boring, I suppose, to
Yeah,
you?
I was bored. I was bored teaching ABCs, one, two, threes. But where I
Yeah.
got to grow was in leadership.
Yeah.
So I think my most frustrating and favorite part of the job was communicating between the Chinese and the foreign teachers. But I was really good. I was really good at it
Oh,
because
that's
I
good.
knew how to make the Chinese satisfied and I knew how to make the foreigners satisfied.
So, what do you think of the early year education in China, especially in Wuhan? How do you see those
Um,
parents and
well, the culture of early years education is behind the policies, first of all. The
uh,
policies are forward thinking, but the culture is behind. And as you know, in China, to change culture, it can take
but
hundreds
the
of
place
years.
you work in costs a lot. They're not public. It's
I
not public.
understand that,
Yeah, yeah.
but the rules are the rules, and Chinese students still need to study the publicly mandated
Mm-hmm.
Ministry of Education enforced curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is that their teachers are taught, that their English is taught by foreign teachers. That's it. Everything else is basically the same. Um, Now, from what I don't know about public kindergarten, but I know that our students had a lot, like there was a pool inside of the school, a golf course, two different playgrounds, like lots of opportunities to play. And in the last semester, it was beautiful watching the school that I worked in changing their ways so kids had more free time, more exercise time, they were learning more skills, they had more products they were actually learning from their experiences. So it was really great. I'm not a kindergarten teacher in Canada, so I can't really comment on Canadian kindergarten, but I really like the way things are going in China's education system, and I really like the what I saw, the last thing I saw before I left my last job.
Okay. Those kids were are obviously from privileged families, right?
Arguably, yes, because they're paying 60,000 renminbi a year to go to the school.
Oh, yeah. So,
And in my last school before that, they were paying 100,000 a year.
mm, so what do you see of those kids? Do you think, uh, because you said you came from not a rich family, a poor, that's your word, and
Hmm.
how do you compare your childhood with them?
Oh, the kids I work with are so privileged
Yeah.
compared to what I had growing up. Like we bought clothing that was secondhand, which means that other people bought clothes new, and
Uh-huh.
then they gave it away to an organization, and we'd go to that organization and look through the clothes and buy those clothes at like 75% less cost. We shopped at like the cheapest grocery stores. We divided everything equally amongst our six children and two adults, two parents. These kids, they have everything. We don't, as
Everything they have.
humans,
Mm.
well, as humans, we don't need a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Shelter, security, food, love, water, a bed to sleep on, and like we don't need much other than that. So the kids that I work with, like with the way they're parented and with the way they're educated and with the way they have wealth, they could fall flat on their face, figuratively speaking. They could fail miserably and they will never, never break through the bottom because
Mm.
their bottom is so secure.
Yeah.
Their foundation is so secure financially and otherwise that nothing can like break them.
So in your childhood, even coming from a poor family, you didn't have an financial anxiety of money, right?
I didn't, not growing up, because
That's
it's all
very
it's
good
all we
thing.
knew.
That's very
I mean,
good thing.
like I was aware of families that had less kids
Mm-hmm.
that had more things. And I
Mm-hmm.
always liked to hang out with those families because I felt more stable around them. I felt more secure around them, but I never knew why. Um, but I had a fun childhood. I had a lot of friends and we played a lot of sports, and like playing sports was a huge part of my culture growing up. I was in the arts. I learned piano. I played soccer, football, depending who you talk to. I had a very rich childhood. Like you can have a rich life and not be
Yeah,
rich
yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of money.
Financially rich. Yeah.
Yeah, I was not financially rich, but we had a rich life, and I don't regret anything about my upbringing, and I don't even regret the fact that I still have student debt. I don't.
Mm.
I take pride in my choices, and I take pride in what I do, and I take pride in the fact that nobody pays for my living except for me. And when I choose to invest in something, it's my money. When I choose to save it, it's my money. When I choose to spend it, it's my money. Yeah, so no, I never had an anxiety around money. Because again,
No, that's a good
in
thing.
my culture, we weren't chasing after money so aggressively. That wasn't our goal.
Mm. You were chasing after education.
Education, experiences, friendships, relationships,
Oh,
yeah, things like that.
that sounds
Travel,
very
you
good.
know.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So yeah, the kids, and have you sensed the relationship between the Chinese parents and those kids? If you have, uh, do you feel anything wrong with them, or you would like to give them some suggestions?
I don't want to say wrong because that's a very judgmental word.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's China is a very old civilization, and the family system is different here than in Canada, for example. Um, I have concerns, but the government does too, and the government's concerns are reflected in their double reduction policies. Um, just like the government said, I agree that children need to spend more time exploring. They need to spend more time playing. They need to spend more time doing sports and activities and arts and making friends. Like it's really strange when kindergarten kids go to school for a year and then when they're away from school for 5 days and they come back and they're crying and screaming for like a week. Like in Canada, first day back, they cry, then they get over it. But Chinese kids, man, they're almost too attached to their families. And I say that as a Canadian. I mean, like there's something called
Yeah,
anxiety, and
exactly.
separation anxiety is when they get separated and they're scared of what might happen. My best advice to like Chinese families would be to say just let them play,
Well, there's some
expose them.
cases where the parents had to be in the classroom accompanying their children so that their children wouldn't
No,
cry.
parents are not allowed in the schools
Uh,
since COVID. Since the
okay.
virus, no parents are allowed in the schools. Training centers are the same. Parents are not allowed to sit in the classrooms for the most part because parents get too involved. They get too opinionated. They start telling people what to do, and then they no, it's not good.
Do you think they're spoiling the children?
Um, so
Do you think they're over taking care
I
of
want
the
to
children?
respond to you in a way that is respectful of the Chinese families.
Uh,
I think that the Chinese families I've seen, which go to private schools, so they do have more money.
mhm.
Um, I think that these children are given too much attention, and it ultimately makes the child selfish. If they get too much attention, then their world is about them and only about them. Um, and the downsides to that is that they can have social problems down the road. Cooperation with other people might be a problem. But I think that the best way to put it is that children are too attached to their families.
Too attached.
They're too attached.
So
Like
any,
and it goes back to my point where Chinese students go off to different universities in different countries and they never hang out with anybody else but Chinese.
yeah,
Like
yeah. So any
like
methods
I
to help that? Any methods?
well, it's simple, man.
Hmm.
Bring your kids to the playground and let them run around.
Oh yeah, you just watch them
let,
from
let,
place
let
far
them
away.
because when the kids are 3 years old and 4 years old and they haven't developed much of a sense of an identity and stuff, let them play with other families, let them interact with other kids freely. I have them join sports teams. Like I know there's a cost to that in China, but have them join sports teams and have them learn what it's like to cooperate with other people. And if you have friends who have families, mix your families with their families.
Hmm.
Have your kids like I know it's different in China because you guys have apartments and you don't have as much space, but like
Yeah.
let your kids sleep over at the other kid's house and
Uh,
learn what it's like to grow up in a different family home. You know,
yeah. That's
these are
good.
simple things you can do to expose your child to different ways of living,
Mm. But there are
and
some
then they can get
playgrounds
more.
in compounds. Yeah, there will be no excuses. Uh, I think that if their children trip down, that they will be like, ah, no, babies. They'll come forward. Then they will take care of their
Oh,
children.
that's the other
Yeah.
thing. If your kid
Mm.
falls, let them fall.
Yeah.
Like, nobody wants your kid to, break open their head and go to the hospital and have an emergency surgery. But like, like if they're gonna trip and fall and get some blood on their knee, let them fall and get some blood on their knee, and then go up to them and say, "Hey, are you okay?" You know, and like let them stand up on their own.
I realize you have some bruises on your arms when you said you got them. Yeah, on the icy spot, and you took it as a very trivial stuff. That's a little bit different from Chinese. I think that's a good thing. That's a good thing of you,
It's an
because the
interesting
Chinese got a
point.
bruised. Yeah, got bruised, and the first thing they got to think is to how to fix them, how to uh, keep them in hygiene position, or take as a or treat it as a very ugly spot. Oh, I think that's not necessary. That's not good.
When I was a kid, I played in the woods.
Mm.
When I
Oh,
grew up, I was camping. I
mm.
was building rope bridges. I was abseiling. I was shooting guns.
Yeah.
I was
People
playing
should
in the
be that
mud.
wired. Yeah, should
Yeah,
be a little bit wired. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, like so getting a scratch on an elbow because a car was parked in a scooter lane and she opened her door and I wiped out and I almost got into a terrible accident and I have a little
Well.
scar on my elbow now because of it. Who cares?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's very good. Thank you for sharing the methods. That I think that will help. Okay,
Well,
that's
they're
been
they're
an
simple. They're simple,
mm,
right? It's not rocket science.
yeah, it's been an hour. Okay, thanks again for being here. We have a very good time. I never realized that how time flew so fast. So next time we will be talking about what's going on. Okay, and let's call it a video.
Yeah. All right.
Bye bye, Mark.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye bye.